Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back to Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs, and in this next segment, we're going to hear from Dr. Tedros and the WHO, along with the German Minister for Development. And the big thing that they're going to be talking about in this next segment is vaccine equity. One of the things that is perpetuating the vaccines of concern is the fact that underdeveloped countries are having trouble getting vaccine doses. The other trouble is education about why the vaccine dose is so important to populations. So these are two of the biggest issues that the WHO is actually facing with COVAX, is simply getting these donations, these doses of vaccine to underdeveloped countries, and to trying to explain the importance of actually making sure that they get into people's arms. So let's listen to what Dr. Tedros and Svenja Schulze, the German Minister for Development, actually have to say on the topic of vaccines, vaccine equity, and doing what it takes to bring the pandemic to an end.
Hello and welcome. Good morning. I welcome you to today's special press briefing on the occasion of the meeting between Her Excellency Ms. Svenja Schulze, Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development from Germany, and Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization. Welcome again. Let me introduce briefly the panel before we go into question and answers, and please use your raise your hand icon on your screen in order to get into the queue for the questions afterwards. Let me welcome first Frau Svenja Schulze, Bundesministerin für wirtschaftliche Entwicklung und Zusammenarbeit aus Deutschland. Guten Morgen. And Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of WHO. We also have Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director for WHO's World Health Emergency Program, and Dr. Katharina Böhme, Chef de Cabinet at WHO. We are also joined by Dr. Hans Kluge, WHO Regional Director for the European region. Dr. Tedros, over to you.
Thank you, Christian. Your Excellency, Minister Schulze, dear colleagues and friends. First, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Minister Schulze and our friends from Germany. As you all know, Germany has been an important friend and long-standing partner to WHO, and in fact, it's now WHO's largest donor. We're grateful for Germany's leadership and steadfast support throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as its efforts to forge a stronger multilateral health system with a strong WHO at the center. In addition to my meeting today with Minister Schulze, I also had a very good call last week with the new Minister of Health, His Excellency Karl Lauterbach. And last year, I was honored to join former Chancellor Angela Merkel to open the WHO Hub for Pandemic and Epidemic Intelligence in Berlin, which will play a vital role in fostering greater sharing of data and information between countries. In its newly adopted program for the G7 presidency, Germany has made an admirable commitment to the equitable distribution of vaccines and other COVID-19 tools to help end the pandemic. Support for health system strengthening in lower income countries and bolstering the global health architecture, which includes securing reliable and sustainable financing for WHO. We look forward to working together to achieve these ambitious, critical goals. I'm also pleased to note Germany's recognition of the importance of planetary health, which addresses the intimate relationships between humans, animals, and our environment. This is also key to tackling the growing threat from antimicrobial resistance. These, of course, are also key priorities for WHO. And Germany's support of mRNA vaccine manufacturing in Africa goes hand in hand with WHO's work to develop self-sufficient vaccine production capacity. This is a wise investment in global health security that has the potential to provide huge benefits to underserved communities. All of these are a testament to Germany's visionary approach, which is rooted in partnership, solidarity, and multilateralism. These qualities are more important than ever because the COVID-19 pandemic is now entering its third year, and we are at a critical juncture. We must work together to bring the acute phase of this pandemic to an end. We cannot let it continue to drag on, lurching between panic and neglect. We have all of the tools to end the acute phase of this pandemic, but we have to use them equitably and wisely. Vaccine inequity is a problem we saw coming. Our experience with HIV, the H1N1 flu pandemic, and other global health challenges has taught us that market forces alone will not achieve equity. That's why we set up the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator and its COVAX pillar. ACT-A is a landmark global partnership we initiated at the beginning of the pandemic, which brings together a diverse group of partners and stakeholders to accelerate the development and equitable distribution of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. Germany has been a leader in both the scale and nature of its financing for ACT-A, going above and beyond in its support for life-saving tools such as testing, oxygen, and PPE. The ACT Accelerator and COVAX can change the course of this pandemic, but they only work with full commitment and funding. Germany's efforts are an example for all, because we still have a long road ahead. COVAX has now delivered 1 billion doses of vaccines, but we still are far from reaching 70% coverage in all countries. 34 countries have still not been able to vaccinate 10% of their population, and 86 have vaccinated less than 40%. And of course, vaccines alone will not end the pandemic. Many countries need diagnostics, life-saving therapeutics, including oxygen and support for vaccine rollout. Only by working together in solidarity can we bring this pandemic to a close. And it's in everybody's interest to do so, because the pandemic has shown when health is at risk, everything is at risk. But when health is protected and promoted, it creates a stable foundation for individuals, families, communities, economies, and nations to thrive. So, Your Excellency, we look forward to working with you and the government of Chancellor Schulze to end the acute phase of the pandemic, keep the world safe, and to address the many other challenges around the world. Thank you so much for your continued support and help. And your presence today, I believe, will take our partnership to even higher level. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Tedros. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich wechsle ins Deutsche. Das ist hier heute meine erste Pressekonferenz als deutsche Entwicklungsministerin und ich finde, das ist genau der richtige Ort und die richtige Zeit dafür. Denn der globale Einsatz gegen die Corona-Pandemie und ihre sozialen und wirtschaftlichen Folgen ist derzeit die wichtigste Herausforderung für die Entwicklungspolitik. Diese weltweite Krise können wir nur mit globaler Solidarität wirklich bewältigen. Und es gilt zuerst auch für den Zugang zu Impfstoffen, die der Schlüssel natürlich zum Ende der Pandemie sind. Und es ist auch eine Frage des Respekts, dass jeder Mensch, jedes Land Zugang zu Impfungen, aber eben auch zu lebensrettenden Medikamenten und zu Sauerstoff hat. Die WHO verkörpert diese Prinzipien und ich danke Generaldirektor Dr. Tedros und allen
General Tedros and all his staff for their truly untiring efforts to fight the COVID pandemic. Germany has now held the G7 presidency for several weeks, and top of our agenda is ending the pandemic globally. That means that we need to achieve vaccination of 70% of people in all other countries by the middle of this year. So we need a massively accelerated, truly global vaccination campaign. And we also need to strengthen health systems, particularly in the poorest countries. That will have lasting benefits even after the end of the acute phase of the pandemic. Nobody should assume that Omicron will be the last variant of the virus. Nobody should feel a false sense of security because vaccination rates in their own country are already higher. No, nobody is safe until we are all safe. We are one world, and this pandemic has clearly shown us all that. That is why investments in the global vaccination campaign are investments in all of our interests. Germany holds the G7 presidency this year, and we adopted our G7 programme at Cabinet on Friday. I can tell you that global health, the fight against the pandemic, will be a central focus of this G7 presidency. We know that around $23 billion will be needed this year to supply the poorer countries with vaccines, tests and therapeutics. The G7 will play an important role in that. We will be pushing for the world's big economies to contribute their fair share of that financing. Germany will also be doing its fair share in 2022. Also, vaccine production in developing countries and emerging economies themselves will play an increasingly important role. Germany has already provided over 500 million euros to help create the right conditions for vaccine production in Africa. We are cooperating in particular with South Africa, Rwanda, Ghana and Senegal. I want to expand that support because vaccine donations are better than nothing, but the best and most respectful approach is for developing countries to have their own access to regionally produced vaccines. From our experience in Germany, we know that the best and quickest way to build up highly complex manufacturing facilities needed for novel mRNA vaccines is to work together with pharmaceuticals companies. We therefore recommend other countries to forge technology and innovation partnerships with industry and support them in that. And we expect the industry to be actively involved and share their knowledge with the world. Here, we welcome and support the plans being made by the WHO and the Medicine Patent Pool to establish an mRNA technology transfer hub in South Africa, the first of its kind. It will be a research and training centre for all of Africa and beyond, researching and expanding mRNA technology. All these investments will continue to be important even after the COVID pandemic and hold great potential for fighting diseases afflicting many people in the poorer countries. What a gain it would be for humanity if there were an mRNA vaccine for malaria. That must be our aim, and it should ideally be produced where it is needed. Equally, we must be aware that this will not be the last pandemic for this generation, unfortunately, and so I want to make progress on the prevention of future pandemics. Luckily, we know what to do. We need better health systems in the poorer countries, global cooperation, and early warning chains. And let me say, as a former environment minister, a commitment to nature conservation. Most new viruses cross from animals to humans. The more space humankind can give nature and leave ecosystems in their proper balance, less danger for future pandemics. Healthy people and a healthy environment go together. I want to further build this One Health concept. After taking your questions, I will be meeting many representatives of other organizations, including the heads of Gavi and the Global Fund, UNHCR, ILO, and the UN Fund for Education in Crisis Situations. Education cannot wait. This afternoon, I will be making a new commitment of 200 million euros from Germany so that children in emergency situations can access quality education. You can find more information at Education Can Wait and at bmz.de. And now I look forward to taking your questions together with Dr. Tedros, and I'd like to thank you very much for your very warm words and the praise for Germany's commitment. Thank you.
Herzlichen Dank, Thank you very much. Excellency, Director General. We'll go over to questions and answers now. We'll have time for a couple of them. And we'll start with Albert Otti from the Deutsche Presseagentur. Albert Otti, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Very well.
Thanks for taking my question. Madam Minister, I'll ask in English for the sake of my colleagues, media colleagues online. You've talked about technology transfer for vaccines and a hub in Africa. Previously or so far, Germany has been opposed to lifting patents for vaccines or for COVID medications temporarily. Is that still your stance? Is that still the government's stance, or has something changed?
Your Excellency.
Ich antworte wieder auf Deutsch. Vielen Dank für die
reply in German. Thank you for the question. The whole question of patents and waivers is a discussion that we are having worldwide, and the German government remains on its position. We support voluntary licensing as part of patent pools. For example, the medicines patent pool, so as to further expand worldwide production capacity. We are convinced that patent protection encourages innovation. It led to the development of these vaccines, and we will need further innovations in order to deal with the further variants of COVID, but also the many other diseases that we have in the world where we'll need vaccines. We know from Germany that it's not enough just to pass on the patent. What we need is cooperation and in knowledge transfer. We need innovation partnerships because producing such vaccines requires extremely complex technology. It's completely new technology that's being used. And so it's not just a question of discussing patents. What it's about is scaling up vaccine production in the developing countries themselves and ensuring that these vaccines are actually administered. And organizing that is the great challenge that we face. And if it would encourage businesses to go along that path and to forge these innovation partnerships by waiving patent rights, then we could talk about that. But my feeling is that it doesn't increase that willingness, but it reduces it, and that's precisely what we don't need in this crisis.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Next question goes to Peter Kenny from News Agency. Peter, please unmute yourself. Peter Kenny.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as patent rights are concerned, is this the position of the EU countries as well at the moment, Minister? And you said that you might change your position if there's there's more success in this area. Could you elaborate on that? Thank you.
Was wir noch brauchen im Moment ist, dass
what we need at the moment is for this new mRNA technology, that production of vaccines takes place respectfully and across the world, and that it takes place where the vaccines are needed most urgently, in the developing countries. It needs to take place there. How can we achieve that quickest? The best way to do that is through technology transfer. We have initiatives as the German government. We are financing vaccine production on the ground. We are helping to establish cold chains. We're helping to ensure that the whole infrastructure that is needed for vaccination programs, that is actually in place on the ground, because that's the experience that we have gained in this pandemic. It's not just enough to supply vaccine and possibly vaccines with only a short shelf life and hope that the countries will manage to administer these vaccines. We need a different path. We need vaccine production across the world. And that is what we from Germany want to support it, what the European Union, and it's also what the European Union supports, and what the G7 has also resolved to do. And we want to continue with that within the G7 context.
Thank you much, Your Excellency. And we have time for one more question, and that goes to Maya from the UN brief. Maya, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Christian. My question is for the Minister regarding the new center that was launched with the presence of President Merkel and Dr. Tedros. How will they cooperate with developing countries in terms of supporting them? Can she expand a little bit more on that?
Tedros, it's your baby. I think that's a question that no one can better elaborate that than you.
I think I do.
No one is tired of you. Also was macht dieser Hub, den wir da gemeinsam gebracht haben? Das ist eine ganz wichtige Institution, um stärker Daten zu sammeln, um das Know-how, was wir in der Welt haben.
Data for amassing the know-how that we have in the world and bringing it together in such a way that it can be used by others. And it's an absolutely key point that we need. In the current pandemic, what we're noticing is how important it is to learn from each other, but also how important it is to analyze data properly. And at the core of this hub that we have launched together is something very important for our further development. And I think that we can learn a great deal from this hub. And so I'm delighted that Dr. Tedros himself helped to launch it in Germany.
Thank you so much indeed. On the hub, it's actually, the idea came from the lessons we're learning from this pandemic. During this pandemic, one of the challenges is sharing information. And we said we need to address this problem, because it's only through sharing of information as early as possible and through transparency that we can fight epidemics or pandemics more effectively. And that's why this idea came. And we have actually another, phrase that's developed with that, collaborative intelligence. And not only information comes from known government nodes, but also from the civil society, from the private sector, and so on. And it brings all partners working in this. It could be academic institutions, it could be other research institutions, and so on. So everybody that comes across any information that may lead into identifying any new development actually is part of the web. So this hub is going to be a game changer, because it brings the whole world together, whether it's as I said, government, academic center, research institute, civil society, and so on. So we can have access to any information. And this is coming willingly from all over the world. So we detect things as early as possible, and we act. So basically, it's an early warning system for the world. But at the same time, since this cannot happen without strong capacity at country level, it will also strengthen the national capacity, because it's the strong national capacity or the strong surveillance system in countries that can help strengthen the global system or the collaborative intelligence that we are saying. So it's basically forging all partners, and it's a network of all partners that can make this a reality. And I'm glad we're already implementing things like this by drawing lessons from the existing pandemic. Not only this, there are other initiatives also which we have started by learning from this pandemic. And the choice of the Berlin hub, especially Berlin, is because it has a lot of potential research institutions and advanced AI technologies that can really help the global hub. Maybe I'd like to just comment on the other part also, especially on the on equity issues, especially on the manufacturing. One, I know Germany is a strong believer of equity. And two, as you rightly said, the issue on TRIPS waiver is ongoing, and we're discussing on it. But one thing we have to also look at it from is Germany, while involving in the discussions, is doing something that should be done quickly, because doing whatever we can do now really helps. And that's why we have the mRNA, South Africa, which is going very well, and that will build the production capacity of many countries, the low and middle income countries. It will be it's a global hub. At the same time, there is also another event actually in mid-February, and BioNTech will announce the start of production in Rwanda, Senegal, and South Africa, I think. That event, Ghana. And Ghana. That will be so. These two developments already that can help in transferring technology to low and middle income countries. Meaning, it's just a principle of let's do whatever we can do now, while also debating or negotiating on the other issue. But I'm glad the last 2 years I have seen it myself. The commitment to equity from Germany is really, really big. And it's not without reason that the last 2 years, Germany has become the number one donor also to WHO. It's because of its commitment. And through the support from Germany, we're supporting many countries. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the minister. By the way, the first successful test kit for COVID-19 was prepared in partnership between WHO and Germany. So the partnership started immediately, actually, as soon as COVID hit. And really our appreciation for that. But maybe, Mike, if you'd like to add on this, because this is...
I'll just make a follow-up point on the Berlin Hub, because the Berlin Hub will form the core of our new approach to strengthening global surveillance and the architecture of global surveillance at all levels. And that means starting with communities, national and global. Surveillance begins in the front line, and epidemics begin and end in communities. But what Berlin does is allow us to bring the technology and the expertise and the visionaries together to develop the tools, test those tools, and deliver them to those who need them in the front line. Dr. Chikwe Ikwezu is the new Assistant Director General. Chikwe was the ex-director of Nigeria's CDC. No one has had more experience in the last decade in dealing with the surveillance challenges and in the world, and specifically in the largest, one of the largest countries in Africa. We're already engaged with many countries. Dr. Chikwe has visited the European office. He's engaged with the European Union, and also his last mission, which he's just back from, was specifically to Egypt, to Cairo, to our regional office, but also to Iraq, to specifically start looking at how we can begin to work between Berlin and all countries. So I think it's clear that the hub is off the ground, and we've already occupied the newly built offices in Berlin, and it's a remarkably fast timeline to move from an idea to a vision to planning to implementation, and having boots on the ground doing real work with our regions, with our member states, to create this collective vision of collaborative intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you, and this concludes our briefing today, and I thank very much Her Excellency Ms. Svenja Schulze, Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.